Hi, and welcome to this edition of the League of Utah Writers Community Book Club. My name is Rachel Bush. I am the president-elect for the League, and tonight we will be discussing E.K. Johnston's book, The Afterward. Somebody hold it up, quick.
Oh,
Oh, good. Look, everyone has it. I listened to it on audiobook. Anyway, so we are going to be discussing that book tonight. E.K. Johnston is one of our keynotes for the Quills Conference, which will be happening August 11th through 14th this year at the Salt Lake City Marriott, University Park Marriott. And tickets are on sale. You can read more about it at leagueofutahwriters.com. So without further ado, I would like to turn the time over to our wonderful moderator and panelists who can lead this discussion. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the discussion.
Thank you, Rachel. I will go first. I am your moderator, Sammie Trinidad. I am a published author. I am an avid reader as well. I am pretty known for my fantasy genre, my magical realism genre. So I also identify as a feminist and LGBTQ. So I am excited to talk about some of those elements in this book. I will leave it to Holly because she's next on my screen to introduce herself.
Okay. I'm Holly Sorensen. I grew up in Utah. I went to the same middle school as Sammie. I am a licensed educator. I currently teach middle school mathematics, but I have taught second grade all subjects and sixth grade all subjects. I feel that one of the most rewarding and toughest things about being an educator is trying to get kids to read and to consider perspectives that aren't their own, and realize that the world is bigger than it is in their own limited perspectives. So always looking for new books and new things to expose kids to.
Perfect. Evelyn, you're up.
hi, I'm Evelyn. Sammie, I honestly don't even know why you invited me, but I will tell you that I am Evelyn Hornbarger. I'm a writer and a person with a lot of opinions. And oh, you asked me as an ally. That's right, LGBTQ ally. That's why I'm here.
And you're a feminist.
And I'm a feminist. I'm amazing. You know, a person of many opinions. Yeah.
Yes, Evelyn is a phenomenal human being, as is Holly. So I'm excited. So we are here to talk about this book, like you said, Afterward. Apparently, E.K. Johnston also wrote Star Wars books, which I think is really great. Yeah, she wrote
Nice.
Ahsoka.
In this vein?
Mm-hmm. Not in this with this world. A different world. But,
I like that.
But okay. So she's apparently a big deal. I love that. So I'm excited. So I've got some questions prepared. Again, feel free to jump in with whatever topics. If you guys had very specific things you wanted to talk about, totally cool to bring that up. But the first one is going to be very broad, but I always love to start with this question when I do book clubs, which is just, what was your favorite part of the book? I know Evelyn has not yet finished it, but what is your favorite part so far, Evelyn?
So far, okay. I really loved I love a first kiss scene, like just in romance in general. And this one was so cute. They're little under the stars and looking at everything and feeling the braids like on her stomach. And so I liked that part. I love a romance. So that was my favorite part so far.
Love that.
Okay. So honestly, I think the part that I found the most compelling was when you find out that one of the lead characters has gone into debt to become a knight. Like, she owes this debt to society. So even though she is a badass, she has, served her country so well. And like that dichotomy of, it's expensive to be poor. She didn't have the money. Now she that there is one way out. And the kind of, I love it when vulnerability is talked about in a character, like in this case, it was poverty is the vulnerability, and it's clearly not weakness because the character is one of the most respected people, one of the toughest people, but still has this vulnerability that was able to be taken advantage of, and that maybe other people higher ups might need to think about that and make some changes.
There you have it. I agree with that.
Oh my gosh. Did you compare it to student loans? I was just like,
Oh my gosh.
hello, hi, do you see me? I'm like, yes, for this little magical dream. And now you're like indebted for the rest of your life.
Way too personal. Thanks.
I know.
For that. It's so, no, so I guess I forgot to mention, of course, that one of the key elements, spoiler alert, again, this is a book club that is heavily spoiler alert, but this is a feminist fantasy LGBTQ book where two girls end up together. So when she says the romance, she's talking about this knight, and in this world, girls are knights, but like Holly said, they go into debt basically to do that, and they have to find a way to pay off. It's like Evelyn said, it is literally a student loan, but a knight loan, which that makes it more fantasy.
Because horses are expensive.
Yes. And then of course there's the other character, which brings me to my favorite part. I feel like Holly related more to the knight. I related more actually to Ulsa, who is the thief. I am not a thief, but I can relate quite a bit to a character who is kind of the underdog and doesn't feel like she has any choice but to live by the rules that society put her under. And she's just kind of trying to do the best that she can. The way they meet in the book is they end up on a quest together. And the book is really interesting because it's told in like three point of view. So they do like a before and after, and those are written in third person. And then they do first person, and it's supposed to be like their flashbacks from each of their point of view as they're falling in love, which I really liked. But anyway, I really liked Ulsa. I liked the fact that she was, I'm like looking through but I liked how determined she was. And I liked how in her eyes, I think it's so relatable as an LGBTQ person who grew up kind of almost always really knowing that I checked a lot of the boxes, right? Like I check a lot of the boxes for, like I'm LGBTQ, I am a minority, I am a brown woman, right? And in a society that very much was not. And so she knows that she's like that. And I love, there's a part in this book where she talks about being in love with, oh my gosh, I'm blanking. I don't actually know how to say her name.
It starts with a K.
It's like Calanthe.
Calanthe. That's how I said it.
In my head. I don't know. I've never heard anyone say that.
That's how they said it in the book, in the audiobook.
Audiobook.
Right.
So anyway, so she in her mind, she's kind of reviewing that. And in her mind, it's just so simple. Like, why can't we just be in love? Right? Like, I don't understand why this is such a big deal. But also her having to kind of find that balance throughout the book of respecting Calanthe's wishes and where she's at in her journey. And I feel like, honestly, I've always been in my relationships where there's been somebody who's either bi or gay. I usually am the one who's a little more comfortable with it because I grew up just kind of knowing that part of me existed, I guess. And so for me, I had a really hard time understanding why people would like kind of struggle with that journey and why like, to me, it didn't make sense in my head. I'm like, we're two people fall in love all the time, right? Why can't we just, I don't understand. And so I actually really liked her growth journey for that because she doesn't ever, I mean, she hints at it a lot during the time that they're together. Like, why can't we just run away together? I don't understand. Like, let's just move and be right into the sunset. And that's very me. Like, I'm a romantic and I feel like things should be that simple. Like, why? And so I just really related to her frustration with society, her frustration with feeling like she just exists. And then people judge her for being a thief when in reality, they created the system that put her in that situation. Mm-hmm. And so I liked her growth in terms of she kind of had to accept that Calanthe was where she was at and Calanthe had some things to take care of before they could be together.
And you
So
know, that was interesting about her being a thief too. And like, she was like, no, you don't own me anymore. Like, I'm a thief on my
I'm
own
a
terms.
thief on my own terms. Yeah.
Yeah, she was like so independent about it.
I know. And I thought that was a really interesting dynamic too, because she's just like so accepting of her lot in life. Like, she's not really trying to resist it. She's not sitting here trying to become a knight. Like, for her, she's very well aware that other people were born with privileges that she's
Yeah.
not, like, she can't have it. I don't feel like she's the kind of character who feels sorry for herself about it. She just kind of makes do with it, which I thought was
She's
really
very realistic about it. She's like,
Yeah.
this is the way it is.
Yeah. And I think it was really kind of cute how there's parts in here where I don't remember where it is, but she says, like, when they're on their quest, and it's spoiler alert again, like, they're on a quest to basically, so again, the book is told from a before and after of when this new god basically came, and they had this gemstone, and they were on a quest to go find this gemstone, and that's, they had recruited Ulsa and Calanthe. And so anyway, but I thought it was really cute how she was just kind of like, I'm just happy to be invited. Like, I don't know why I'm here, but I guess I'm here for a reason. So I'm just gonna hang out with a bunch of knights. And like, she just owns her place at the table. So I loved that. Like, I love that she was just kind of like, all right, well, y'all are the ones who are weird. You're the ones who are all sitting here trying to figure out your expectations. So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna sit here and steal my stuff. Like,
Also, I wanted to jump in. I loved their fight. I really like, so, I'm in a heterosexual marriage, right? And the biggest difference as far as feminism inside my marriage is that I grew up in a family that was very privileged financially, and my husband did not. So, and that was part of his trauma that he really played close to the chest, right? So I knew that there had been some struggles, but I didn't realize how much that was going to impact his day to day, right? So when Ulsa and Calanthe get in that fight, and Calanthe's, it's pretty much, essentially, why are you the way that you are? Why do you keep getting in trouble, right? And for Ulsa to finally, this happy-go-lucky person who doesn't give a crap about really like getting caught, like whatever, she just is so even keel, to wheel on her and to be so frustrated as she tries to explain that you have privilege and I don't, even though, the undercurrent is we're both women of color. We both had, similar opportunities, as people like to say. And it's like, to be pissed off and trying to explain to someone that you really care about, I don't want to have to explain this to you.
mm-hmm.
Right? I got that talking to. My husband was ticking me off because he was so freaked out. But I was just trying to get through school, and I was trying to I had my head down, and he wanted to talk to like a financial consultant and open up a mutual fund with like $10,000. And I was like, do you have $10,000 I don't know about? Like, what are you talking about? Finally, he's also not fully able-bodied. So he's like, I'm afraid that my time is going to run out. My body is going to quit on me before we're financially stable. And I have not been financially stable. And for our family, I want to be. And it was like all the air. It was just their journey, just of them, and there wasn't a solution, which I also love, where it's like, have this fight and it's like it's all just there and there's no easy fix, and they
just sort of, yep. Have you gotten to that part yet in the book, Evelyn? I think
No, I haven't gotten to that part where they have a big fight
I
yet.
can't remember. I thought it was closer to the beginning. Maybe it is closer to the end. Can't remember. But Holly and I are both fast readers, and so I think both of us tend to forget when things happen in the book. Yep, that'd be me.
Only know I know that character's name starts with an O.
So anyway, but basically what happens is exactly what Holly's talking about, Evelyn, where Ulsa, she's been thieving for even after this new world gets created, right? supposedly
Oh,
it's
actually, yes, I did get that.
yeah,
Yep,
right. So
I did.
supposedly it's better. And then Calanthe is basically just like,
Why are you still doing
literally
that?
don't have to do that anymore. She's like,
Mhm.
no, I literally
She's like, I actually do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about that then, because that brings me to something I found really interesting in this book, which is that, so the flash forwards, I guess, or the present, the after part of it. After they've done this gemstone, right? So these new gods to kind of take over. What I find interesting about this book is that feminism is kind of rampant in this. Like it's normal for women to be in positions of power here. It's normal for, you know, magic. Some people have magic. It's some people don't. I was a little bit confused about who was
Yeah,
it.
the magic rules.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
me too.
Yeah, I was.
no, I'm cool with the soft magic system. But
Mhm.
what I wanted to kind of pitch to you guys for your thoughts is just how do I phrase this? So what I found interesting is that even when women are in a position of power in this book, it's kind of like what Holly was saying, which is that there's still so many nuanced and so many different layers and so many different situations women can find themselves in. And so I think as a feminist, one of the extremes that I hear is that like, if everything were just equal, it would be fine. Like if women just had these positions that meant it, right? It would be fine.
Mhm.
What in this book do you feel like highlighted some of the problems of that, or do you feel like it showed really well? You know, what are some examples?
Well, the one that stood out to me was the childbearing. So they came up with that tea that they could drink so that they wouldn't get pregnant and they wouldn't have their monthly cycles.
Mhm.
The weight of like, right now I have a baby, he's 9 months, and I'm just like, I never have my hands.
No.
Like, I don't even know what to do with them when I have them because they're constantly being held by, like, I'm constantly holding a little baby. And what was I trying? Oh, I was trying to plant a tree. I was just trying to plant a tree. Did you know you need hands to plant a tree? Like
So
the
relatable
entire
right now.
system of plant, like the men in the fields and the women in the house taking care of the baby is, I was like, well, obviously, because I don't have any hands to plant the cotton fields or the corn or whatever, because you need your hands for it. And I'm holding a baby all the time, or he's eating dirt, which apparently people frown upon.
Mhm.
So whatever. So that whole idea of like, even if everything's equal, like the biology is so challenging. And for a trans man to have to still deal with the biology of monthly bleeding and like the possibility that you could possibly end up pregnant without intending to, it's like such a burden on a woman that your whole life is going to be, whether you choose it or not, like there's that possibility always of having a life within you and then being responsible for it at all times.
Mhm.
It's just like,
Mhm.
it's a whole universe within a person. It's a big weight.
I thought it was interesting how, I don't know, the thought that came to mind for me is that just because things are equal or there's equal opportunities, or even if something's accepted, clearly like women having power is accepted in this universe, it doesn't mean that there's not going to be problems. Like it doesn't mean that things just magically stop. Like there's still going to be conflict, and there's still, I thought it was so interesting how you still see a lot of the struggle of Calanthe, who, again, like it's very clear that it's normal for a woman to be a knight, right? It's clear in this world, like Sir, I forgot the name of the main knight, but the one who leads.
Oh, right.
Anyway, they call them Sir, right? Like they even have the same titles as men in this book.
Yes. Okay, I did have okay, Sir Branthier. So Sir Branthier is a trans woman, right?
Trans woman, yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
And so
Which
I thought
was
that
cool.
was so cool. So, but again, like just because something is accepted in the world doesn't make it easier. And that's what I thought was interesting. I think so many, just again, speaking as the only LGBTQ person on the panel, at least, I sometimes fantasize about that, where I live in a world where people just like, everybody is LGBT. Well, not everybody, but like it's not like such a trauma for people to talk about. It doesn't have to be like this huge like accepting your identity thing. But then this book really opened my eyes to, I'm like, wow, okay, so life is still gonna life, and there's still gonna be a lot of nuance. Like, okay, well, I felt really seen, but I also felt like my eyes were opened quite a bit. Holly, did you have any thoughts about this?
I did. What is the dude's name that Calanthe ends up?
Oh, so spoiler, Evelyn, I don't think we reached this part of the book, but
Well, she's like engaged. Did she marry?
Yes.
what's his name? I forgot. His name.
Okay, so
Or-
this I thought was a
Eric?
very interesting plot device, because we're used to stories of either women like Cinderella, which I can't stand, but you know, where the man has to come in and do all the things.
Yep.
The fairy godmother and the man have to come in, hold your hand, do all the things, because you can't do any of the things. And then it's like, that's stupid and unrelatable. So then I feel like the pendulum kind of sometimes tips too far the other way, right? Where it's like, this woman is amazing and perfect.
All the things she
The
can do.
Katniss Everdeen, where it's like, she will never make an ethical faux pas ever. And like, I'm not saying I no shade for Katniss, but it's just like taking down an entire government that's
Single-handed.
whole
That's
thing,
true.
right?
She's really good at
By
that.
shooting an arrow, she took down an entire government.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did.
It's just like, and we want that, right? It resolves. This is the big problem, and she fixed it. However, one of the real parts of advocacy in feminism, in anti-racism, in all of these things is realizing that some people are so far behind because of the system that now we need to give them a hand up. Like, it's the only way that we're truly going to level the playing field, as if we
Right.
of whatever the wealth is, right? So the fact that she goes, this guy has privilege. He knows that she does not want to marry him. He knows that this is a shitty situation for her. And he's willing to do this. And like, not for himself, but for her and his daughters, enter into this marriage and give her his estate. It's just like, what? And so I was kind of pissed because she didn't do it herself, which made me kind of think about, because I also, like, my internalized misogyny, I had a harder time than expected keeping track of all of these women called Sir. And I was like, it made me a little bit uncomfortable how long
Me
it
too.
took to
I
it.
had such a hard time with the titles.
I'm a martial artist, and
I
I
know. No, I really, it took me
ran for years.
a fourth of the way through the book to realize, like, oh, wait, it's just a title. It's not like it's not indicative of a gender. Oh,
Yeah,
like,
which is what I love for students, because it's like, you point out, it's like, so why is that hard for you? And you just kind of let them sit, right? And like at 29, trying to actively be involved in feminism, it's still hard for me, which pisses me off. But here we go. But the fact that it's like, it's a very realistic solution for helping someone get out of, she's able to live the life that she wants. She's done everything in her power. She's gone above and beyond, and she still needs help, which was just like,
Well, the interesting thing is he's also trapped in it, right? Like, he has
Oh.
this estate that
well,
he can't
you
give
haven't
up.
read the ending of one. So the ending.
no.
Is he not? Okay, well, I haven't.
So
Like-
he dies.
Interesting.
He's
Okay, I figured
dying
he's
of
gonna die. He knows he's gonna
terminal
die. He's
Yeah,
buying.
no, he dies, but then like
Buying.
he still ends
He's
up
marrying a widow. Like, he even says
Yeah.
that. Like, I'm marrying a widow.
Yeah, he's literally
Right.
He's gonna
like,
pass on the legacy.
I am doing this for you, like, which is so
For you, for the people that I'm over, his
Mhm.
land people, and his daughters.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I wanted to talk about that too, because I mean, Holly talked about that, you know, why it bothered her from a feminist perspective, but Evelyn, you and I are both writers, right? And as a reader, I felt like this as a reader, I was really unsatisfied at that part, and it took me a while to pin it down, and I realized it's because it felt like it was too, like it wrapped up almost too easy.
It was too tidy, huh?
Yeah, it was too tidy.
Yeah.
and too easily solved. And then I
So
also had
convenient.
to sit, but I also had to sit with kind of what Holly was saying, which is that I realized that it felt like he, in his privilege, was just like, I feel sorry for you. I'm going to give you this kind of thing. And I was just like, she's literally been working her entire life to try to like find a solution. And here you are, a man who just has money and like is about to die, just handing her.
Well, it was
She's so much cooler than you.
Yeah, it was
She's
frustrating
out of your
because
league.
she was a place filler. So any woman could have filled
Mhm.
that role,
Yeah.
any noble woman or any
know.
good-hearted woman. So that is frustrating.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny
And
too,
he-
because I
and it
had
was
a little bit of
convenient.
a feminist rage moment where I was really annoyed with her for being so grateful for it. Cause I'm like, really? Like, you can't, like, you're just gonna accept the fact that like he, again, but that's probably my Ulsa side coming out, because I am a rebel, like hardcore in life. And I would be the kind of person who's like, no, we need to tackle the system. Like, don't give me a solution that solves my tiny problem. I want one that's going to uproot. But I think one of the things this book does well, after I had my little moment, is that it has to start there, like with what Holly was saying. It has to start where, again, we do give the people who are behind a leg up. And I guess like there is something to be said, like when you do finally get those opportunities, like what do you do with that? And Calamity
I would
accepts
be
it really
very interested in what they, how their Ulsa and Calanthy's relationship in the public eye kind of unfolds.
Yeah, especially because Calamity has a lot of fame. Like everybody knows who she is.
Yeah.
It's weird to me that like people, even though Ulsa was part of the same quest, people seem to like still look down on her because of her status. And I'm like,
well, also she kept stealing things.
I mean, fair, but again, I'm like, is that really
Right.
their fault or is that the system's fault?
It's I hear you. Yeah.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just one way to
She
find
was like really proud of her part in it. It's interesting. And I wonder if she really did have an alternate choice. It didn't
Yeah.
make it seem like she did, but
Mm-mm.
Well, and it's interesting too, this book kind of brings to light, there's a section in the book where Ulsa is kind of talking about trans people or people who, have different sexualities, and it's much more accepted on the streets. And I thought it was interesting how like the higher you went in position, like the harder it was to be a different gender or to like change genders or to, have that
a
position of
different
power.
attraction.
Even though Ulsa had less privilege in terms of wealth, she seemed to have a more, like an easier time accepting identity. And I
That's
was like,
true.
huh.
I didn't
Oh,
think
no,
about
she
that,
did.
but that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's true
Yeah.
and seems applicable, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just,
Also, I will say this for like back to I've done some work now, which I grew up in Utah, right? Like it's no secret that there's this whole idea that like people need to be pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. Like the opportunities are here.
Yeah.
Like
We love
blah, blah,
bootstraps in Utah, don't we?
that's some hard.
oh my gosh.
Give
But
us
like-
some bootstraps. Watch us pull ourselves
Oh.
up.
And it's the fact that my immediate thought, like I had to sit with the uncomfortableness of it when someone else solves Calanthy's problem and it's like, no, let her do it herself. And it's like, she has done
Okay. Like, yeah.
like
Yeah.
like really breaking down that it's like my immediate thought is because it's, and I know there are a lot of reasons that people think like that. For me, I think it's a real product of the way I grew up, and the world is safer if you think that
Like,
there's
you have some control.
every problem that doesn't involve thieving, right? That doesn't involve sex work. That doesn't involve,
Oh, and do you remember that part in the book too, where she was like, I could thieve or I could do sex work, and I chose
Yes.
thieving?
I was so happy when she said that. I'm like,
I
listen,
know.
okay.
It was such a
Like,
good moment.
Don't
Yeah.
come at me with
Yeah.
your-
Oh, this is like balls out. No
Mhm.
punches
Yeah.
pulled. I love it.
I love it. So one of the things I thought was interesting, one of the reasons it's called the Afterward is because you get to see the aftermath of when they steal the gemstone and when they
Mhm.
have, when they have the new gods, quote unquote, take over. And I think that's so interesting because most stories stop when the revolution is over, right? Like we get to see the quest and we get to see them uprooting the system and, But this is an interesting play on what happens in a society when you're still reconciling with these hard issues, right? And it was, I did have a moment, I don't know if both of you had this as well, but not just as a feminist, but as an LGBTQ ally, where like all of these people, the sirs, whatever their names are, like all the ones who went on the quest with Calanthe and Ulsa, all of them at some point, like they all talk about her and they all are trying to, you know, say it's important to be there and to bail her out. But none of them actually, like, none of them
go
anything about it. And they just are all just gonna, oh, that's really sad. That's unfortunate. She's still stealing. And I'm like,
someone should do something about that.
Went on a quest together, right? Like they're all for it. They're all for them falling in love. They're all for, and I'm like, why is no one doing anything about it then? Like it was so frustrating for me to see these leaders who, you know, live in a world where apparently LGBTQ is normal, feminism is normal, and they did nothing. I'm like, you have magic. Like, is there no way that you can just magic her into a position? Like,
right.
But I mean, to be
That
fair,
whole, like,
no,
you're
it's also-
strong.
but
Yeah.
still,
If you're strong, you can handle it.
but they all talk to Calanthe about it. Like a lot of the sirs talk to Calanthe about like, well, you know, go easy on her. Like this is something she has to do. And it's like, so you guys are acknowledging that, you know, this is something she has to do, that she's struggling on the street.
Yeah.
And Calanthe's the only one speaking for her and like keeping her from being her head in the news.
I'm like,
Yeah.
you some support. And so let's talk about that in terms of what do you guys think that shows about allyship and how what it means to be real?
Okay, I have some thoughts.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so I'm LDS. And there was just a stake youth conference. Well, not a stake youth conference, a stake. So that's like geographical fireside on LGBTQ issues, right? In our stake, which is cool that they did it. Very gutsy. Not every stake takes that on. It was a panel of 10 and there was one gay young single adult on it. Okay, which is better than none. But it was, I didn't let my kids go. I said, I'll be going to like know what they're saying. And could have been like it could have been worse for sure, but I just left going, I bet all the straight people in there felt really good about themselves, like that they're allies, like good job, look at us, we're creating space for people, we're listening. But it was just so short, like it wasn't enough at all. And the main issue that I had was that white straight men in leadership were speaking on things they knew nothing about. So like the questions were coming from the youth. So they were asking about all kinds of things. And one of them was like transgender. And this guy's like, well, I like to wear basketball shorts at home. And but when I go out, I change into my clothes so that I, you know, so that I present myself well for the world. And I'm like, oh my gosh, stop talking. Like, I'm embarrassed. Everyone should be embarrassed. You don't know what you're talking about. Please stop. My son has to wear a binder and can't walk upstairs because it hurts to breathe. So like, stop talking about changing out of your basketball shorts so that you can present yourself to the world. It's like so frustrating that people don't know when to shut up and just listen. And on that note, I'm shut up and listening to the people who know more about this on the panel than me.
About allyship and what this can kind of, what this brought up for you, or what it may help you realize, I don't know, insights. Lessons.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's so weird because this book is subtle, but also just scathing, right? Because they're not going to actively point out that these women know the situation, and they're like, no.
Just
and it seems like women in power who could really do something about it, you know, like, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something, maybe I read it too fast, but it really seems like any one of them could have gotten that together. But you know,
Yeah.
you know, as a teacher, I will say that trying to figure out that from what I've experienced, advocacy and feminism, it looks different for everyone. I think you know me, for me, it's I don't talk if I don't know what I'm talking about, and I will listen to you no matter how uncomfortable your story makes me. And that is kind of the superpower that happens over here. I'm not in a position of power. I'm a female teacher in a small town. Like, that's all I've got. But I'll hang pride flags in my classroom, and I'll ask for your pronouns on the first day of school. And I'll listen to you if you tell me that there's something that I can be doing better, and I'll seek out those opportunities for myself. And realizing, I think it's a really scathing review of the whole, you know, in like anti-racism spaces where it's like, oh, well, I have Black friends. Like, cool. It's like, oh, we're friends. I know her. I like her. And it's like, and
Yeah.
right. It's like there's this big gap. And I do love, so as an educator, one of my favorite things to do when you're trying to teach kids about something like this is to use media, a book or a movie clip or something, and the kids develop kind of what they think advocacy is, right? So if it's part of its action, part of its compassion, part of its inspiration, vulnerability, like whatever, you have a discussion and they come up with that group, what they think that looks like. And you have like 8 criteria, rank them 1 to 10. And then you have the kids read the passage and mark how they think these fictional people did, which helps them to, you know, not go into, I didn't mean to, and that whole intent versus impact situation, because it's not them, right? They didn't do it. So you're able to have those conversations. And this is a very clear example of, it's like, this is literally life or death. Okay. She's going to starve to death one of these times in prison if you don't intervene. Like, it's not just unfortunate anymore, you know? And so, I mean, I think it's sometimes hard to know what advocacy looks like, but it sure as hell isn't just like standing by and letting people say things that are hurtful and letting people persecute your friends and count your lucky stars that it's not you, you know. It's just, it's not that.
I love that. Well, again, speaking as the person who I feel like, metaphorically speaking, I guess, is Ulsa probably in this closest to Ulsa, I guess. The person who ends up in prison. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, there was that one time in college. No, I'm lying.
You're the thief, Sammie. We know it.
Anyway, no, but like as the person who has been in that position where it feels like I've had those thoughts where I'm like, why are my friends not standing up for me? Why are they just, you know, why are they standing to the side while this is all happening? Don't they care? You know, like all those thoughts. But I do think it's interesting that Ulsa never demands that of them in the book. Like, she's never once been like, why don't you just bail me out? Why don't you offer me a place at your home? Why don't you know? And so I will say that one of the things that I think Holly nailed that I wanted to point out in this book was, I think they nailed some really good examples in this book of how to be an advocate on a personal level. So for example, the sirs, even though, you know, they are in positions of power, one of the things they do with Calanthe is like call her out and say, like, you don't understand. Like, why are you judging the fact that she steals when you've had food your entire life? You know, stuff like that, where it's very clear that Calanthe is, you know, even though she's in love with Ulsa, doesn't really get it. She doesn't get her life story, and you can tell she's a little uncomfortable. She doesn't really want to hear those details, right? And so I do love that in this book they kind of forced Calanthe to like sit with Ulsa's story, like just sit with who she is, where she comes from, just sit with it. Like that's part of advocacy. But I think one thing that frustrated me that I think the world can do better at, and I think that this book also shows really well, is that I do believe that like there's personal advocacy, kind of like what Holly was talking about, where like you do what you can, and then there is power, right? Like the people who are in power, I feel like need to take action. Like those are the people that I tend to hold a little more accountable in my head, because I'm like, listen, not everybody is in a position of power to be able to do anything about this, but those who are, it frustrates me that you don't. Like it frustrates me that you stand by because, you know, you benefit from the system staying the same. Like
Also, Sammie, like, how is anyone else going to get in power? Like, they're in power and no one else can get there. So yeah, you got to do something.
exactly. And so, and I mean, there's so many people who, given that position, would do something with it, right?
Right.
But especially again, like the fact that like the you said it before, lady, no, that's her. What is her name? I found
Sir
it.
Branthier?
Branthier, yeah. So like the main knight who kind of led the quest, right? Like this is her world. She's running the show. So the fact that again, like I'm like, you call her your friend, but you literally like her life is on the line and you don't seem to give a damn.
One of them's literally the queen.
Yeah, she is the queen. So I'm like, I don't understand how this system is still in place. Like I don't get it. Like, especially, I mean, because I think she has a conversation with Calanthe eventually about this, which is the whole debt thing, where it's like, how do we make a system where people can become knights without having to go super in debt? And honestly, it was really kind of like what Evelyn was saying, which is when you start getting to the nitty gritty parts of systems, right? Like student loans or like all that money's got to go somewhere, right? So I get that like there are different pieces to the puzzle that I'm probably not aware of, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm like, but doing nothing is like one of the truest forms of cruelty to me. Am I a little bit emotional because I felt for my girl also. I'm like, you're all talking about it, like you're all talk, and that's all I see is you're just sitting here talking.
It's like, go ahead, try something, and if it doesn't work, okay, at least we tried it, then we can do something else. But like sitting because we don't have the perfect solution is no way to do anything.
Yeah, and so I was so frustrated with that.
Yeah.
And then especially like when, I mean, again, sorry, everyone, like you haven't finished, but spoiler, like Ulsa is the one who eventually takes action and has to be the one to freaking go get
get it, girl.
And I was like, okay, so like, you all just sat here and said, you know, you just talked about how things needed to change and how it would be lovely if you two could get together, or it'd be lovely if you know, Calanthe wasn't. But I'm like, well, why does she have to marry a man in order to? It's so frustrating because like in some ways the society is so much farther ahead than ours, and in other ways I'm like, you still deal with the same problems. I don't understand.
Even like, in fantasy, we can't get out of this.
Yeah. I'm like, well, it's such an interesting take on the fantasy element because it does have that vibe of like medieval, you know, they're knights. They have clearly, you know, some of these knightly things that they do, and they have these soft magic systems that they use, but it does feel kind of futuristic in that like some of these laws that are passed or the way that their society is set up is further ahead than most societies. But again, like things like that where I'm like, why is this one element stuck in the past? I don't understand. Like, why is it the law that she has to marry a man in order to fulfill her debt? Like, I don't understand why. Whose idea was this? And then again, when the anyway, when they became queen, I'm like, why didn't you just abolish it?
You're like, look, we owe her enough in hazard pay. Okay, we're good.
Like, just fine. But again, like, I do understand that that'd be like the president of the United States basically pardoning a ton of debt. But
oh, really?
No.
You don't want that? I'm in favor. I'm okay with that.
No, I would be too. No, that's the thing is like, I am in favor of it. I'm like, honestly,
it's fine.
Who cares? Like, it's all debt. This is a new world. Like, literally in this book, this is the afterward. Like, this is a new. I feel like this was a clean slate, and it's just so interesting to me that like some of those old traditions still like stayed. They just
Yeah.
it's like, it makes me wonder, I'm like, did you just do that because it's convenient? Like, just because like you don't know any other way, you don't know how you would solve it, so you just left
How
it.
would that look?
Like,
Mhm.
so anyways, I'm getting a little fired because I'm fired up. Like,
Yeah.
listen, okay, justice for Ulsa. That's what I'm gonna start that.
Justice for all.
Anyway, but I
Right.
do love that they end up together. I'm gonna say that
I
because
do
I'm a
too.
romance too. So I'm like, okay, they did it despite stupid society, which is how I feel about most things.
I mean, I was getting nervous as I got closer to the end, as this is such a scathing review. It's
Yeah,
like
I was like,
people off.
maybe this is like,
Yeah, maybe this is a tragedy. They should have
yeah,
been
it's like,
together.
no, I think
Look
they
what you
leave it to, like, the last-
did.
they leave it to like the last couple of chapters.
Yeah.
Like, so I thought that was, and again, just some of these stupid laws that like exist in this book, right? Like the fact that Calanthe, Calanthe like she has to wait till she's 18 to pay this off. I'm like, why? Like, she's literally basically
just
politely
arbitrary stuff. Yeah.
forever. Like, why does she have to do that? So
Again, did you go on a quest to get the gemstone? No. She can be excused. Okay.
right? Well, I love how like humble she is about it, right? Like there is something to be said about being the top of your class, right? And then knowing you're kind of hated because you're ahead of everybody in that way. And then
Right.
because and then like
No,
not
she's
even
the
having,
best.
it's very lonely. Like that's one thing I thought was really well done with her. Like Ulsa was the perfect, counter to that, because Ulsa really is just like, yeah, well, I mean, I literally like, I care about everybody, but also I will see you for you.
Right.
Okay, so one of the other things I wanted to bring up, because again, I brought you both here for very specific reasons. And again, if whatever you're comfortable talking about, because I would never want somebody to talk about something that I'm comfortable with, right? Or haven't sat with. But Holly is a teacher, right? And a hardcore feminist. And then Evelyn, you do have a son who is trans. And so I wanted to pitch this question to both of you. Why do you think it's important for young readers to read books like this? Particularly with the insights that you both have, like Holly's an educator, she works a lot with young kids, and then Evelyn with seeing how media probably affects your kid.
Holly, you're so articulate. Do you want to speak first?
Thank you. I talk to people for my job, so I hope by now than where we started. But yeah, so I work at a small private school, so the whole "don't say gay" bill does not apply to me. So I recognize there's some privilege that's inherent in that. I can just put this on the shelf and not worry that I'm going to lose my job, right? I can recommend it. I can do whatever. I have spoken to the students. I mean, I'm not the English teacher, but I am close to the English teacher, and we had a conversation in front of them on, what's the policy on books with like sexual content, with whatever. And she goes, I think I'm going to go through and label them with like a sticker. And one of the kids was like, why? And looks at them and she goes, well, I don't want you picking up A Clockwork Orange and not having anyone to talk to about it, or like Of Mice and Men. And I was like, there are some books out there that are disturbing, that are sad, and we want to, if you're reading them, if you're ready for them, we want you to have that opportunity. We also want you to have adults that know you're reading it and they can process, right? So there's that element of it where it's like we want you to have exposure. We don't want to be hiding anything from you. But I have some kids who are non-binary. I have a lot of kids who identify as pan. I actually identify as demisexual, and a lot of the staff, one of my favorite floating teachers, he's the kid's favorite too, is also trans. So I work in a very inclusive place, which is really, really wonderful. And I had this with me at work. I had it in my purse. And I put it on my desk, and one of the kids was like, "What is this?" And I was like, "Oh, it's about two women of color lesbian knights in like medieval times." And they were like, "Are you serious?" I was like, "Yeah."
Mm.
And they took it out of my hand. We're like, "Can I read it?" I was like, "Well, I need it, but yeah, I'll give it to the classroom library when I'm done." Like you,
Oh.
and it's like, it is so powerful for these kids to see themselves in writing and to feel less alone and to realize the power and the value of their own voices, right? Where it's like, there are kids that don't feel valued because they're told to conform always. And they're told that they're not good enough always. And there's also value. There's real value. There was for me as a human being. My world was small, right? Utah is a really kind of, there's a lot of the same in Utah. There's a lot of the same religion. A lot of the families look the same. There's not a lot of room for diversity. And when diversity does happen, it's certainly not celebrated. It's certainly not lauded as a strength. So there were books that opened my eyes to the struggle of what it's like to be LGBTQ, what it's like to live in poverty. The Glass Castle is one of my absolute favorites. And there's all of these things, and I didn't have to ask someone to explain it to me. I didn't have to make someone do that emotional work for me that did not want to. And it allowed me as much time as I wanted, as much time as I needed to sit with that. So broadening my world, recognizing that while this is a fantasy, I really love a memoir too. So people who are willing to share their stories, they increase the compassion in the world. They help kids realize that who you are is enough. They help kids realize the value in different experiences and in celebrating people who are different. I mean, it really cannot be overstated that we become much more compassionate, kind people, and better learners, and more open to real solutions as we realize that there's never a clear-cut solution to any problem that affects society, because no two people have the same experience. That's just really so incredibly powerful.
I love that. Thank you.
I love that too, Holly. Okay, so my son came out like recently within the past school year. So we're really early on in our voyage. He's only 15. So some of the media that like really helped me was on Survivor. There was a trans survivor, Zeke, and he was on a couple of seasons, and you don't know that he is just Zeke, like in the first season, and then is outed in the second season as a trans man. So you just know that he's like this brilliant, articulate, kind of funny guy. And then you learn this other aspect of him that just makes you like love him even more, right? So I had that person who I don't even know. He's a stranger on a TV show. And then Schitt's Creek, there's not a trans person in there, but David, and how authentic he is, and how quirky and wonderful and lovable, and just, so when my kid came out to me, like, I grew up as an LDS white person with, I do not know trans people. I had like these two little people that I knew on TV that don't even exactly fit the bill, but seeing them, I'm like, it can be okay. We can do this. It can be okay. You can be okay. I can be okay. We can make this happen. So like having a book with people who are experiencing different things gives us a way to see what's possible, especially like it's fantasy, right? So like anything's possible. And I loved in the book when she's like, do you like boys or girls? Like, I like girls. And it's like, the world is bigger than I ever imagined. I like it. You know, like what a wonderful way to process someone's coming out. Like we could all learn something from that. Like, wow, you're even bigger and more amazing than I ever imagined. I like it. Like that's just perfect. So I think having authentic experiences of so many different kinds of people help us all. They help allies understand how to respond and realize that it can be okay and we can do this and we don't have to be scared. We just need more information. And we can walk through it together and we're going to be okay. Like we've got each other.
That's incredible. Thank you for that, Evelyn. One thing I wanted to also pose as well. So I also have a brother who is trans, and without getting, too involved with his story, because that's his to tell, but he saw that I was reading this as well. And he is just the sweetest, most intelligent person. Like he really is. Anyway, so when I had a very similar experience to Holly, where I was like, bro, like fantasy, medieval, knight, lesbians with trans representation in it, bruh. And he was basically, and I was not expecting his reaction because he kind of just sat there for a second and then he took the book and he was like, Sammie, like he started tearing up and he just said, oh my gosh, like people care enough about us to write these stories now. Because of course, like we're the only LGBTQ kids in our family. And so, and it just like, it both broke my heart, but also made me realize, it was just such a tender, authentic reaction to seeing stories about ourselves, right? Like that was just such a real thing for him. And just, and the fact that like I tend to get a little more riled up. I feel like I'm the one who's like, oh, justice, like, why are people dumb? Like the system's stupid, whatever. And he's more, his reaction was just like, it's happening. Like, people are loving us the way they finally should. And I'm like, bro. And so I just wanted to pose as well that I think stories like this are important, not just because representation matters. Representation matters too, but it also helps us to understand that all representation in any kind of genre is a reflection of humanity, right? Like just what it means to be human and what it means to be alive and to love and to connect, right? And the fact that like, if I had had this growing up, I honestly feel like I would have been more comfortable with dating a girl, at the time, because I'm bi, so I, swing both ways. But I was really, I grew up in Utah as well, and so I was really homophobic for a long time, and really at war with a lot of these sides of me for a long time. And I feel like if I had just seen how it could be normalized, but also that two people could end up together, and it's completely okay, and they're, one thing I loved about this, because I think often LGBTQ stories end up reflecting a lot of the struggle of whether or not we are LGBTQ, right? One or both of the love interests struggles with that. In this book, that is one thing I loved, is neither of them denied it the entire time. They both knew they were in love. It was very, very clear they were in love, but they had other obstacles in their way. And I think that is actually really important for LGBTQ, for colored kids, for feminists, right? Like for us to see that it's not going to be easy, but it can be okay, like at the end. So I wanted to close. Okay, that sounded like very church-y. I didn't mean it to sound like that. Anyway,
You would like to share your testimony.
Oh, I would rather not. Anyway, so, but I really loved this quote. Let me see if I can, this quote, and I just kind of, you can either share your thoughts on it or you can open up to questions after this. But there's this quote in the book that says, I think people show us what we need to see, The important thing is to remember that they are more than what we think they are every time. We must look past what we need to see and find the truth of them. And I just, to me, like that's like all representation, right? All advocacy summed up so nicely. Anyway, so if you guys have thoughts about that or additional things that you wanted to say before we open it up to questions, now is your chance.
Amen.
Speaking of
Perfect. Okay, well, questions. I did want to address, Rachel put in the chat, she said it was I liked this. She said, for me, this felt like a reflection of how women can sacrifice so much and still have no voice.
I saw that.
The truth.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I mean, as an educator in America right now, I think, you know, yeah, we all know what's going on in the country right now. And I have this book, which would likely be banned in certain circles. And I, on my desk, also have this one, and almost everywhere as far as I understand it. And the fact that I feel like not only do sometimes I not have a voice as an educator, I'm villainized for wanting to get stories in the hands of children that will allow them to recognize the humanity of the people around them, to see themselves in stories, in love stories. You know, as I watch this as someone who grew up in Utah and fell in love with the boy down the street and married him, I see parts of our love story in these. I connect to these stories of people, regardless of gender, falling in love. I connect with the pain of, you know, how far would you go to protect the people that you love, right? I connect with the pain of feeling lonely, of feeling like the world doesn't have a place for you. And I've been called, you know, a loser teacher by politicians. I've been called incredibly unprofessional by parents. I'm villainized not only by society, but I'm sometimes villainized by the parents of the children in my class. And in this situation where, well, what breeds compassion and what breeds change is connection. And the fact that society right now is more afraid of connecting to stories of people who are different than us than they are of teachers and students who are dead is really, really unfortunate. And I told Sam, I just wish that every person who made decisions had to stand in a classroom full of terrified second graders like I did and explain to them what a lockdown drill means and tell them what we need to be really, really quiet, because and they're like, is this, and the looks on their faces as I tried to explain to them 10 times, it isn't real. We're just practicing. It isn't real. But it is. It is. It is for people every single day. And the fact that, you know, not only that we have no voice, that not only are they not hearing our pleas literally for our lives, but they're trying to silence the voices that we have as we try to connect our students to the world around them, is just like, it feels really hopeless right now. And it's unfortunate to see that reflected. And it's sad to me how much I relate to how hard we work, how hard we try. We do everything right. And we have no voice. And if we use our voice, we may have no jobs.
Gotcha. Wow. I was just reading the comment, Alex. Yeah, Alex, that's right. You are a teacher as well. And yep, I can imagine, or it
It's-
sounds scary.
Mhm.
Alex, have you read the book yet? The Afterward? Highly
Yes,
recommend.
actually,
boy.
got an advanced reader's copy from Brian before it came out. That's how I became friends with EK. I was like, wait a minute.
You're
Dude,
friends
we
with
need to-
EK?
Really?
I need to meet her.
Cool
She
people.
sounds amazing.
Quills. So excited
Yes,
for Quills.
I will be there. Don't you worry.
It's so good.
So, but this is brilliant. It really is. It's so subtle, like Holly said, but then like it's one of those books, like the longer I sit with it, the more I think about it. Like,
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
because I thought it, at first I was kind of like, okay, well, that was like, at first I was telling Brian, I'm like, I can't tell you the plot points, like nothing really happened. and then I realized that I'm like, oh, I guess it's not really about the plot. Like, this isn't one of those books that's like high concept, like let's charge the castle. It's
Mhm.
it's very people focused and relationship focused. And I'm like, oh,
That's all of
You
her books.
you don't see
Mhm.
that so often, right? Like in
Yeah.
fantasy.
I love the way she writes, because she always does that with her books. She makes them centered around the characters and their attachment. So I've read all of her original fiction, and
Wow.
it's all like that. All of it is like that. Every one of her stories is focused like that, with these very subtle undertones of connection and what it means, and how things are not fair, and how it really reflects the way she and like most of us feel powerless. And I don't know, I think it's fascinating. So it's really wonderful, and the diversity she always writes in her books is, I think, so important for all of those reasons, and it just keeps getting better and better every time. Every book she writes is more and more diverse, so you can see more and more facets to society. But yeah, so if you want to read something amazing that she wrote, That Inevitable Victorian Thing, it is my absolute favorite by her. Love that book.
Oh, love that. I just think it's interesting too how this is fantasy. And so like I almost feel like you almost don't notice the themes as much until you're done reading it, because it is in the guise of fantasy and kind of like this different setting, and where the whole time you're just trying to figure out like what the world is. And again, like, but she does such a good job, even though it's fantasy for you, because again, like we all had very specific and distinct reactions to the world and to the society and the norms. And so she does a really good job like highlighting the differences and highlighting the similarities of the worlds. I'm like, ooh, that's hard to do, like in fantasy. Speaking as a fantasy writer, I'm like, wow, I need to take notes, because
Mm.
it's amazing. Cool. Any other questions though? Anybody have any other additional thoughts? I know Alex has read the book. Who do we have here? Tara. Hi, Tara. Anyway, so if anyone has any additional questions, we'll give you a chance to ask them. More thoughts. Okay.
I figured out how to blur my background.
You did it.
I know, this is important information for everyone.
Just in
A
time.
second too late.
I know, just in time. And I added she, her at the end of my thing. So
I'm proud of you.
I'm
Oh,
doing
yeah.
so good.
I usually do that for mine.
I
Well, that
figured out how
one
to
time,
read it.
yes.
It's all technology problems. Got it.
Oh, always.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for this book club. We always have these the last Friday of every month, and we always highlight different books that really that are very encourage like thought-provoking concepts. And usually, I think the theme right now is books that that change the world. So books that change the world. I believe I want to say, Rachel, we agreed on as well. Like we're halfway through the year, we're also switching to books that are banned books, books that you know. So,
Yeah.
like,
Thought provoking, anything that's amazing.
yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anything.
And next month we will be discussing 8 Omens Before the Destruction of the Empire by Willie Paloma, who is our poet keynote for the Quills Conference. And then I also, Sammie, we have our third keynote. It will be Daniel Kraus, who writes horror. And I am going to suggest we listen, or not listen to, sorry, I'm listening to Rotters right now. I want to have a discussion about this book because it is the most beautiful, disturbing, wonderful. I can't, I hope that's the one we choose. So maybe
We'll talk about it for sure. I mean, I'm not as experienced of a reader in horror.
And
because I'm-
this one is YA, and it's spectacular, and it's so gritty and beautiful, and but I have to take it in tiny pieces. So that will be our book for July.
it's
So
like we have a book for that. Alex wants it.
Yeah. Oh, Alex, you would love it. It's so good. But yeah,
All the
so-
horror.
Oh, I'm literally just about to comment how I need more horror in my classroom library because my students are like, it's like crack, and I'm like, yes, it is.
No joke. One of my girls dead ass looked me in my face because we had extra time and I was like, what am I gonna do? I'm trying to I was going, we got 10 minutes. And she looks me in my face and she goes, let's watch a murder show.
Oh,
Yes.
Yep. They be like that.
And they were like, I saw your Spotify. I know you listened to My Favorite Murder. I know it's on your Netflix.
My favorite murder.
I've never heard. Is that actually good? Anyway.
Yes.
It's
Oh my
not-
gosh, Sam, you don't listen to My Favorite Murder.
If you like true crime,
Okay.
I'll send you the
Stranger
best
Things is
one.
about the level that I can handle in terms of horror. So-
Also, listen to, I
Comedy.
mean, not that it's my namesake or anything, but lore, like if you're really into like
I've heard of
folklore horror, and like he has
looking-
such
I'm
a soothing
writing that
voice
down.
and it's terrifying, but it's so
Huh.
good to fall asleep to. So fantastic. I'm like, oh, I could write
Oh
about
my
this.
gosh.
Oh, that's horrifying. My writing students are like, Lore, like, what are you doing? And I'm like,
have you
"Guys,
listened to his
like,
Cabinet of Curiosities too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, anything he does, and I'm like, dude, your voice is crack. Like, continue. Like, just
I love it.
Okay, well,
Oh
there you
my
go.
gosh.
Okay, well, we will be announcing that pretty quickly here. What title we decide to go with. It sounds like we have quite a vote for this. So love that. Right now, I think we're gonna stop the recording. But yes, please join us. They're always available to the public via Zoom, and we would love to have you.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.
awesome. Thanks.